Hey, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. We had a little technical hiccup there. I hope you all had a great time, lunch, and you're not too sleepy for the next session. Um, my name is Igor. I work with an experimentation platform, and I will be talking about experimentation platform. That's the second part for experiments presentation. Should be continuation from what Rommel was presenting. I think we have around 40 minutes given the start. So let's get going. We will be talking today about experiments and feature flags. There's just two things, but there are a lot of details to cover. So let's get going. As you learned, and please tell me if you don't hear me well. I'm not used to work with this mic, but I think it's fine. First thing, when you work with experiments, so as you learn from what Rommel was saying, why do we run experiments? We run experiments to learn about our users to understand their behavior and to find a way how to improve their experience and consequently help our business to grow. And when you deal with experiments, there is usually steps that you go through, and Rommel touched on this already in his presentation. So you start usually with a hypothesis. So you have an idea that you want to check, or maybe an idea of how you want to change your application in hope that it will be easier to use by your customers. So it all starts with an idea. Then you go and think about your experiment, about the design of your experiment. How do you want to run it? What metrics do you want to look at to see if your idea is actually working, or maybe it's not working, but it gives you other insights. And there are many more details in the design. Rommel also touched on that. There was a question about how do we notice if something goes off. And one way is, of course, to include guardrail metrics. These are metrics that will usually, the company have a list of them, and it will help you to notice if there is a chance that you may hurt business and maybe you want to stop experiment or maybe make another conclusions. And then when you're ready with your design, you go to actually run your experiment. And you can see I use the word trial here. And in the company, we use the word experiment. But if you look, you will be reading something about like how other people do it. And you can meet these words like trial or study. People can use different words to call it, right? Randomized control trials. You can hear online randomized control trials. We're using term experiments. So you go there and you, at this step, third step, you run your experiment. And when you're ready, if your experiment showed that, okay, you found new experience and you want to make it part of your application, because experiment you run on a sample of users, not everyone. Then you go and you launch your new experience. So you make it available gradually to the whole population. And when you're done with the launch, you want to solidify this. You want to make this experience the default experience of your application. And this cycle, it carries on. So then you may have another hypothesis, go on through another experiment and whatnot, right? So these are steps that you will mentally go through when trying to make a change or learn about our users. And we at Experimentation Platform, we're building tools that will support you on this journey. And when working with these tools, you will be working with some concepts that we define in the system. So let's look at those. As you can see, there are like three concepts, main concepts. There are more, but these are main concepts that you will have to deal with, and they correspond to certain to steps in this experiment process that you will go through. So first thing is experiment. And experiment in the experimentation platform, it is defined in terms of control and one or multiple treatments. Control and treatment, what they do, they define user experience, and it allows you to try different experiences and actually compare them to each other, and that what constitutes experiment in nature. Control and treatments, they also work with a fixed samples of users, random samples. They allow you to do that. If we look at the control, what the main purpose of it is to fix a sample of users who will be receiving the current experience, who will experience your app as it is currently with no experiment, and it will be the base for you to compare against how your whatever you try, the new treatment, how does it compare to these users who have the base experience. And it means the treatments, they fix samples for the users who will get this new experience, and there could be multiple of these treatments. But the question is, how do we actually, so okay, we come to experimentation platform, we create an experiment, define control and several treatments, but how does actually this experiment and experimentation platform, how does it change user experience, right? What is the connection there? And the answer is that because when you write your application, you make it configurable. We also say sometimes that your application is parameterized. And what it means is basically that you use configuration that is defined in terms of parameters to customize your experience, how the code behaves, right? This is why we use parameter, the name parameter in the platform. We will get to it, I think, next, right? So let's look at this thing. So we have configuration, and there is your application, and together they define user experience. So if you can see, the first thing, it is a kind of illustration of what configuration is. Configuration is defined, as I said, in terms of parameters. It's just composed of parameters. And here the arrow points at the first parameter. The name is list button color, and it is assigned the value red. Okay, there is another parameter, and it's list button position, and it says bottom left. And we have another parameter that says which icon to use. But when this configuration gets to your application, you read this information and you just change the code so the experience is different. You can see that in the code, we just said the basically configure the button. So we make the background the color of that one that is provided from the config. We set the icon, and then what user, the end user will see, they will see your app with this button in the left bottom corner with the camera icon on the red background. So that's how you can customize the experience of your end user using experiments in the platform. The next concept in the experimentation platform, and it follows experiment. So if your experiment is successful, which not always happens, actually, this is very important. Every experiment is a success because it allows us to learn about users, our user base, what they like, what they expect, and whatever, right? But sometimes, and it will happen often actually, that some of the treatments, this new idea of a new button or whatever, it just didn't work out. So we look at the metrics and they just not satisfiable, they are lower than we expect. So we will not release this feature, but we learned a lot. So we know that this, if we use a rectangle button, we know that for some reason people don't like it, so we can keep it for later, right? But if our experience that we tried, one of the treatments was successful, so we like how it behaved from the metrics, we can launch it. And this is where this launch concept comes in. So it makes the successful treatment available to your users, and it allows you to do it gradually. And another concept in the experimentation platform is remote configuration. And this guy, it defines current user experience. Is basically what your users will, how they will experience your app if they are not in any experiment by default, right? Sometimes we call it default experience. And yeah, so now I think it's important to look at how, so this experiment launch and remote config, they somehow all affect what user experience will be, right? So they work with our users, the whole user base, and we also refer to this as a traffic. So all your users is a traffic, and they work with traffic, but they do it slightly differently, and it is important to understand how they do it. So let's first take a look at how experiments do it. So there is an example of an experiment. This guy has one control to treatments. Treatments have equal ratio. The experiment is set up to run on 20% of all the users, right? So you have all the users and 20% will get the experiment. And this experiment is currently being rolled out to 50%, right? So, and we can see on the picture, so the first bar is the all traffic, the 20% is there, and the next bar is experiment traffic, which is equally split between control and two treatments. And these blue rectangles, they signify that it is currently is 50% rollout. So if we roll out it to 100% of experiment, all 20 users, all the sample will be in the experiment. That's how experiments work with the traffic. Now for the launch, it's slightly different. So launch, it rolls out a single treatment, just one treatment. It runs on all the traffic except holdouts. So for holdouts, it's a deep topic, right? So, but just for now, you need to know that sometimes you want to reserve a fixed sample of users who will not get your experiment. And I will just briefly say, so when you run an experiment, you may save some users to not experience it. So later, when you finished with experiment, you can have fresh users who didn't experience it to compare it, to verify again, like, was my experiment actually correct? Is it like the result that the conclusion that I draw from it, was it actually correct, right? This is why you can use holdout. So launches, they exclude holdout by default. And this is this magenta cross there on the traffic, on the image. The next thing, the remote config, it's the simplest one. It applies to all traffic. So unconditionally, when you enable something, everyone will get it. Okay, so that's how it works with the traffic. And now maybe one more. Now, when we know this, let's look one more at how this way that you configure your application. So you write in a certain way. How does it help for running experiments? And as we learned that, like, if we configure our application, so without changing code, we can change user experience, right? So if you said that button color comes from configuration and you want to try different button colors, you don't need to change the code anymore. So it is much easier, right? And also configs, as I said, is defined in terms of parameters. So here, once again, we can see this big picture on the left is your default experience. So how your user will see your app by default, right? You can use experimentation platform to change this experience for some users. So you can see we have two guys here. One guy is probably in control because it on the top right, it experiences the application as it is, as everyone sees it. But the other guy is probably in the treatment because we thought, look, maybe blue button will actually be more attractive to users. Maybe they will click it more if it's blue. Who knows, right? So maybe that's, we want to try our hypothesis, like, is it correct? And that's how we can make it. And then it is actually this configuration. There are, because we said there are experiments, there are launches, there are remote configs, right? How they all come together to like become this one configuration, because for your application it's just one config, right? How does it come together? If you look at this chart here, we build configuration in steps, kind of sequentially, right? So this is conceptually, but this is how it happens. So the first, it starts with the base configuration. And this is very important. Rommel touched on it, and he made the point that base configuration is critical, so you have to have it. It should come with your application. It should be 100% reliable, and it should be complete. It means if, for some reason, experimentation platform is not available, your app should not crash. It should be operational. The user can use it. They should ideally not notice that experimentation platform didn't work, right? And this is why base is so important. This is where we start. But then these three rectangles, this is remote data that comes from experimentation platform, and it is applied in the order as it is specified. So we start with the remote configuration. It is downloaded from the experimentation platform, so it's an API call with all the consequences, right? It defines the default experience of your application, and it is much easier to change than the base, because if you see, the base often is included, base configuration is often included in the binary. So imagine if you want to change it, you will have to change the code, push the code, do all the work with it, release it, deploy it, whatever. There are so many steps. But if you use remote config, you just go to dashboard and you change the configuration, and that is it. You updated it, right? The next step is launches. These are new features in rollout. We'll talk about it more later. And then come experiments. So they basically, they applied afterwards, and experiments, usually they run on smaller traffic. So imagine you have config that defines default experience. Then there are launches that define currently new features being rolled out, right? And then a small portions of experiments are applied on top. And when we combine all of the above, we create final configuration that what your application will be working with, right? And that configuration will basically define the experience of the end user. I think now we are ready to explore more complicated and kind of closer to the real life example of how can it happen in real life, how experiments, launches, and remote configs, how they work together. So I prepared a little simulation, but it actually is based on the real case in the company. So let's recap a little bit before we go there. First, experiments, right? Experiments, they run in a subset of traffic, okay? They can be run in parallel. So you can run many experiments in parallel, and this is what actually our system enables you to do. So you can experiment more in the company. In the experiment, you can define multiple treatments. So maybe you have heard about A/B tests, right? So where you compare two variants, but sometimes you may want to compare 3 or 4, who knows, right? So you can do it with experiments on the experimentation platform. Experiments also allow you to control which experiments users will be in, because some experiments, imagine they happen on the same screen. They may be, as we call it, interactive, right? They're not interactive, they may interact. So it means treatment of one experiment may actually affect the treatment of another experiment, and we don't want the same user to be in these two experiments at the same time. You can do it with experiments. You can control this so they not happen to be in there. With all that said, so experiments, the object called experiment and experimentation platform, you see there are so many words experiment. That's why I wanted to use trial so much, but then people don't use it in the company, so you will be a little bit confused about it. So I use the same word. So this concept in our platform, it is very good fit to run experiments. Next thing is launch, right? So launches, they apply to all users. They allow to gradually roll out a single treatment. This is very important. So you can do it in small steps, right? Instead of just, imagine if you do binary release, you make it available to everyone. And if there is a problem, well, that's a really bad situation to be in. With the launches in experimentation platform, you can roll out gradually. And it's just one click of a button, like 1%, 2% of users and whatnot, right? Launches, they may not overlap. That's a detail, but we will talk about it, I guess. Maybe not in this presentation, but basically, because launches apply to the full population, whole population, you cannot roll out two conflicting features, right? So it's kind of comes obvious when you work with that. And launches, they are overwritten by experiments. It means when we launch new features, we can still keep running new experiments. This is very important. And it makes launches very good tool to rolling out new features. And the third part, the last part, is remote configs. They again apply to all the users. They don't have gradual rollout. It's just binary. So you either make it available or not. Configurations may overlap. And this is also, for them, it comes naturally because, I will maybe not go and explain it, but imagine you have a configuration for a region like Asia, right? And you want to say, I don't know, like the currency that's being used or shipping methods that being available, but then you may want to override it per country. This is why we can start with a config for region and then apply config for the country so they can overlap. For the remote configuration, when the client gets information from our system, they will not emit logs because logs are expensive, and we reserve logs to run experiments because they are very important when we run experiments. So for configs, there may be no logs. And remote configurations, they can be overwritten by launches and experiments. And it makes this tool very good fit for defining the default experience for your users, right? So let's get to this example finally. So this is a real life example. It's a little bit abstracted, but it comes from the real life, more sophisticated scenario. So you can see there is a timeline on the bottom. There are 3 lanes: experiments, launches, and remote configurations. And there are a number of experiments that we run like one after another. After some time, we also will be launching a number of features, and we will be making them default experience. And now we will go through this picture, so it will stay there for a while, and we will be just inspecting certain points in time and thinking about that. And also, it would be nice if you can kind of look at it and try to understand it, because there will be little questions that I will ask you just to like make you like think how these guys work together. So there is just to make it more interactive. So let's get going with this thing. First, let's inspect some, let's say, key points in time. So at this point in time, we have one experiment running. So it just started. We call it E1. And it has one control, which is A, has marker A, and we have 2 treatments, B and C. At this point, this experiment has finished. We say that treatment B was successful. We observed from the metrics, and we start launching it. This is why the launch thing appears there, launch B, right? At this point in time, we start another experiment, and we try to improve user experience in the same area, right? This is why we couldn't run it maybe at the same time, or maybe an idea came to us inspired by the first experiment. Oh, we want to try this as well. So we start this another experiment. You can see the launch is running at the same time. So the previous successful treatment is still in rollout, right? So it still didn't reach 100% of your users. At this point in time, we're in the middle of running the second experiment. The launch, though, is finished, and we'll make this treatment, the B treatment from the previous experiment, which is controlling the current one because we compare with the current experience. And now we make it the default experience. So we create a configuration for this guy. At this point, the second experiment finished. We observed the treatment D is successful, and we launch it. Then we start yet another experiment, and we want to try something else in the same area, in the same application. It has only one treatment and one control. And here the launch of the D treatment is finished, so we make it the default experience. Okay, so now it is all fun and good, right? So we see how they continue, how we start experiment, how it follows to become a launch, how that one follows to become config, etc. But all of these guys, their job is to define, as we talked about it before, user experience for the end user, right? So it means at any point in time at this chart, we can look at it and we can say, okay, this is what the user experience will be. And that's what we're going to do right now. And I will be also asking giving you a little time to think about it. So let's see. We take this point in time. There is just one experiment running. Here is the picture with the details, right, about this experiment. This experiment, it runs on 80% of the traffic. It is currently fully rolled out, that is to 100%. And we can see it on the chart. We also sample 4 users, and they fall in different groups here. You can see these black dots in the very top rectangle that are just sampled, users sampled from this part. And at the bottom, we see this user guess. It is user experience. So what the user experience will be, right? Here, what we have an experiment that has that configures experience to be A, right, B, or C. And just take maybe 5 seconds. It should be self-explanatory, and just maybe write down and think for yourself what these 4 people will get given the picture. And I will remove these question marks. Let's see what these people will get. Pretty obvious, right? So we have 4 people. First person gets A because it falls in the control of the experiment. Second person gets B, they fall in the first treatment. And third user will get experience C because they fell in the second treatment. And the fourth person, it is actually out of the experiment, so it will not get any experience from this experiment. So it means it will see the app as it usually is. Now let's look at another moment in time. Now we have one experiment, the second one. We also have lunch running at the same time, so it will be a little bit more complicated, but still should be self-explanatory. So this experiment, we call it E2. It runs on 50% of the traffic, and it is also fully rolled out. But there is also a lunch, which launches the treatment B, and the lunch is rolled out to only 80% so far. Again, please take a look at this picture and try to guess what the experience of these 4 users will be. Let's now see what it actually is, right? So the first user will experience B, right? So it will, their user experience will be defined by this B treatment. The second user will experience D, and the third user, it will experience B. But you see, the first and the third, they both have B, but they come from different sources. So the third person, they are not in the experiment, but they appear to be in the lunch that currently is being rolled out. So that's why they get this new treatment, right, that came from the first experiment. And the second experiment has B as well, because we want, as I said, when we run experiment, we also want to have a fixed sample for control. That is people who will experience your app as it is by default right now, right? And just, yeah, okay, I will ask you next time. There will be one more question, I think, like this, and it will be more complicated. And it can be interesting. I will actually ask you if someone had different answers, different idea about it. Yeah, so in this point, we have one more experiment, one lunch, and one config, right? And this is more complicated because now we have all 3 parts, experiments, lunches, and configs, working together. So this experiment, it runs on 50% of the traffic. It is fully rolled out, that is 100%. We also have a lunch that is 80% rolled out, but we also have config that it makes experience B available to default experience, right? And now take a look at this picture, please. Maybe 5-10 seconds, just think about it. What the experience of these users will be, of these 4 users. And I will show the answers, but I also want to ask if you have any, that your answers are different. Here are the answers. So the first user has D, the second experiences E, the third user experiences D, and the final user if you remember, they didn't get anything because they also always like were happened to be neither an experiment nor in a launch. But now there is config, so they get B as well. So did anyone had like any other idea, any other answers for the users, or did you answers much? Did much? That's good. Oh yeah, that's cool because it can be really tricky, and here is quite maybe simple on the picture, right? But we have only one config, one launch, one experiment. They also ordered in the way how they applied, so you kind of can follow it. But in the real life, it can be more complicated to understand, right? But you need to know how these pieces work together. So I hope it was useful. And so far, we worked with the traffic. So we talked about experiments, launches, and remote configs, and they all work with traffic. So they segment users by traffic somehow, right? Experiment, first you say experiment around some 20% of the users. So you segment your traffic as already, like you fix a sample of 20% of users. Then within this experiment, you create control and several treatments, and you further segment your users by traffic, right? But there is also another way to segment your users. And this is very important. Rommel talked about it as well. So let's take another look at that. We can segment users by their attributes, right? So when users use your application, they may be in a certain country, they may use certain locale, they may send other characteristics about themselves, and we can use these characteristics, we call them client attributes, to target those users. We call this targeting. So this is an example of a configuration, a remote configuration that doesn't use any targeting, right? So all the users will get the B experience because that's what configuration gives them. But if we apply targeting on top, we can say only users who are on the iOS version 5 or above, or Android users who are version 113 and above, only those people will get this, will get B from the configuration, right? And another real life example can be, imagine we have one application and one binary, but we run it in different countries. And we want to say in Japan, we want a treatment B, right? We want B to be the default experience. But in Taiwan, maybe we want D to be the default experience. This is how you do it. You apply targeting to your configuration. And targeting can be applied to experiments as well and other parts, right? Okay, so there was a lot of information. I hope you're still with me. And actually, I'm looking at the time and we don't have much time. We still have some, but not so much. We learned a lot, and you may have a better grasp after our two presentations, like what experimentation is, why you may want to run experiments, and how it will change the way you write the code and actually change it for the better way. And I hope we'll have time to talk about this today. But there is still so much to learn about experimentation, right? So there was, I will tell you a few like spells from this experimentation spell book, so to say, because looking at the names, they can be really confusing. But once you understand what it is, it's a very catchy name, right? To have to remember it. So one is SRM. It's sample ratio mismatch, and Rommel was explaining about it in his presentation. Another is confounding variable, and there is a Twyman's law, and the last one, it's like the most difficult to remember. So I remember these letters, but I often forget what they stand for. Like SUTVA, you say it, it's a stable unit treatment. What is it? A variable assignment. Yeah. So you see, this is tricky, but once you know it, you know that this thing exists and you will be aware of it, and you have to be aware of it because there's a common pitfalls that can happen when we run experiments. I think I'm finished with this experiments part, and I hope there was something that clicked. And the slides are available, so you can look at them, and I hope to refine the material. So I also hope I find time. According to my watches, we have like 3 or 4 minutes. Do we have more? Like, how much time do we have? We can continue. Okay, so I will try to make it like 10, 15 minutes more. I want to make a little break and tell you a little story. So we switch the gears a little bit from the technical details. And just imagine that you meet with your friends and you decide to write a book together, right? I will actually give you a hint. We're now talking about software engineering, but we will start from a far away, right? So you meet with your friends and you decide to write a book together, and you think, okay, we want to finish it faster, so each person will be writing a separate chapter, and then after some time, we come together and we compile the chapters and we make one coherent story, and our book will be complete. So you decide to go away for a month and work on your chapters separately in isolation. And then after a month, you meet with your friends, right? And then you just look at the situation. So you went on, and at least you agreed on the name on the character, right? The main character name is John, so let's say, and you decided that John is a police officer. Your friend, though, decided they're a firefighter, and they wrote the chapter about how John was a firefighter and all his adventures. Another friend decided that John was a chef, so he was very great at cooking. And now you look at it and like, what a mess. It's the character job keeps changing. The story plot is all around, all like over the place. Its story is not coherent. I mean, you don't know what to do with it, but you still want to have your book, right? What this example can teach us? It can teach us that if we want to write a story in isolation, so we have to be ready that we will find ourselves in the situation where we'll have to stay late, trying to merge these conflicts, how to make John be police or firefighter, I don't know. Then we have to rewrite large portions of the story because you look at them together and they are from different books, so you cannot just put them together. You also have to decide whose changes should win, because, John cannot be like chef, firefighter, and policeman at the same time. All these jobs are very difficult. So, but these can be really hard because imagine you decided that John is a firefighter. You wrote a chapter for a month, so you're invested in it, and everyone also is invested. And now deciding who should win, should John be policeman, firefighter, or a chef, it can be really difficult. You will have to fix dozens of characters and events because you want to make this story one coherent piece, right? And the worst of it all, that it is very possible that you will have to start over in some areas. It's not surprising that this story, it can happen when we make software. Same exact thing. Look, we can just replace a few words, story with the code. And look, when you write the code in isolation, it leads to rewriting large portions of the code, fix dozens of features, stay late trying to merge conflicts. I am pretty sure you have experienced it. If you haven't experienced it, you still have very good chance to start on the right foot and not go there. We call this situation integration hell. That's how we refer to it in software. But let's step back for a minute and let's imagine that as authors, we decided to meet every day. And we met every day and we were reading the latest changes to each other. We're presenting our ideas. So you come and say, we also have this like daily meetings, right? So we come and say on the day, after a day of work, that John wants to be a police officer. He wants to work in police. And this is all good. And someone says, okay, you think John should be police officer. let's decide right now before we go and write a more story about it. So we at least stay on the same page. And this is so much easier right now to solve this conflict than trying to fix it after writing a few chapters. Just imagine, like in the story before, after a month of work, you come, everyone with a stack of paper, like, how do you choose police or firefighter? I mean, someone have to give up, and so much work is wasted and time, right? And the mood will be not good. The story tells us, and if we make this lesson, if we make this takeaway, it will be tremendously helpful. Is the pain of a small conflict today is much better than an agony of massive conflict next month and even in a week. So what it tells us, if we're working on something, we want to go and talk to like our teammates, we want to merge the code, we want to stay connected, because sometimes we may feel, oh, it's not ready yet, so we will stay a little bit longer with the code and later we merge. But the longer we wait, the more disconnected we become, the more difficult it will be to address in the end. If I would say it shortly, I would say integrate early and integrate often. And you should think of integrating daily. And ideally, you have even to think beyond that. You have to integrate several times a day. In software, we call this continuous integration, and people often call it CI. I'm pretty sure you heard this word. And to do CI, there is like common confusion that people think that CI is Jenkins or CI is, I don't know, what is the Circle CI and whatnot. Tools are very important indeed. But you have to remember that continuous integration, it is about discipline, because it is you who will make the decision, work in isolation for longer or come and show your code to your teammates, to your partners, to merge it in the main branch, right? To resolve the small conflicts today or not. So it's more about discipline. And as we learn from the story, it's if we do it daily, we will have small conflicts, maybe not every day, but sometimes we will have, and it is much easier to resolve. And we will stay happier overall working this way. But on the right here, if we take another approach, if we stay in isolation and work separately, even for a week, or some people you can see they can stay for a month there in isolation working on their code. When we come and want to join our code together, there will be so many big explosions, big terrible situations where you will have to discard a lot of code and maybe stay late to fix something that actually works. So yes, integrate daily or be ready for hard time. Your choice. I hope you make the right choice. You say, right, integrate daily, but is it like that easy? Because imagine it can take a few weeks to finish a feature, right? You cannot finish every feature in a day. Like, what do we do about that? We can merge and finish code, but then if we merge and finish code, we cannot deploy, right? We cannot release, and our code base will be broken. So everyone will scream at us, like, why do we do it, right? Not really. As with everything, there is a way to do things, right? So here come the feature flags, and feature flags is a very simple tool, but it can enable your continuous integration efforts. So with feature flags, we can write the code and integrate it, that is merged in your main branch, when it is still unfinished, and keep the feature off for the time being. So look at this picture, right? So there is a code and you work in the area where you add your feature, and there is a feature flag. Currently I replace it with a just false literal. It says, if false, then, and there is your feature. So the code will never, execution flow will never go there, but you are able to merge it. All the compiler checks, all the tests will run and whatever, and your code will be already deployed. The feature is off, no one will see it. So you can continue working on that. And this is day 4 of you working on the feature. And suppose, let's suppose you're 40% in, right? With feature flags, you can integrate continuously. You can integrate daily. Well, you can integrate several times a day because no one will be seeing your feature yet, but it will be in the code, right? So day 7, 63%. With feature flags, you can also resolve conflicts early and often, right? So when you merge the code, even though it will not be available to your users, the compiler will tell you if something is wrong. Imagine you and your other teammate, you have to make changes to the database, right? And you make the changes and they make the changes. Then you try to merge and you see that your changes are incompatible, right? So you can resolve it, but you don't wait a month until you go and rely your code on the change that will be not working in the end. And with the feature flags, you can also deploy your system and release other features. No one stops you doing that. And I said feature flags is it's a very simple tool. So you can see there is a false there. It can be local variable. You can start like this. You write your code. You see where you will toggle your feature, where you will load your module or whatever, right? It depends. So it's software engineering. So you decide like how to make a feature available. But there you can create local variable and set it to value false and just leave it at that and keep adding your code, right? So compiler will do the work, tests will do the work, but no one else will see it from your users. Right, so feature flags is a simple tool. It helps us to do CI, continuous integration, and it's good software development practice. That's all good and nice, but why I'm telling you about this, it was supposed to be about experimentation platform, right, the presentation. Well, there is a good reason. There is a good reason for this. If you use feature flags, your new learning discipline, and experimentation platform together, then there are so many more benefits that you can actually have. And together with your new discipline of CI, you know, if you combine them, you can have a lot of interesting stuff. Let's see what you can do. Maybe most important thing, you remember I told you that it can be local feature flag, local variable, right? But then imagine if it is experimentation platform that you call to get the value for your feature flag. Then you can toggle it on, turn it on, the feature in an instant. You can just go to the dashboard, flip your fingers, and the feature is on, right? You don't need to change the code for this. And now you will feel like really a magician, you know, because it's like before maybe we used to think, and it's here on this slide, we used to think that deploying the code and releasing the code is features. It's the same thing, right? And many people still work like this. But with feature flags, you don't need to do this with feature flags and experimentation platform in this case, right? So you can deploy often, and it is also very, very good practice, but you can also release your features separately. I will speed up a little bit because I think we're a little bit over time, but I want to cover this still. So we, with a feature flags and experimentation platform, as I said, we can release in seconds. So it's as simple as just flipping the switch. You see it was off and now it is on. Now you made your feature available and it's just like click on a web dashboard. With a experimentation platform, another benefit that you can not only remotely turn on and off your feature, you can also gradually roll out your feature. It means you can start with a 0%, so no one will get it, but then you move this to 5% or 1%, and 1% of your users will start receiving the feature. So you can go and see the logs and metrics if everything is fine, right? With gradual rollout that was enabled by experimentation platform and feature flags, and with this separation of deploy and release, we can see like how much benefit we can get, because imagine your feature has a problem, right? And if we use it the old way, we deploy the code and release the feature at the same time, and if there is an issue, how many people will be affected? Maybe everyone may be affected. Those people who use the app, they just will be crashing or whatever, right? But if we use the new practice of continuous integration, and we enable our feature and release it to 1% of the people and watch our logs and metrics or customer support inquiries, right? We can detect the problems early and only few people will be affected. So your users will stay happy. It also means that if there is an issue and you cannot fix it immediately, or you need a fix for it, right? You can roll back in a second. You come back to the same flag, you flip it off, and that's it. Everyone is working with their previous version, no problem anymore, and you can go and fix the bug. So with the feature flags combined with experimentation platform, you as an engineer will stay happier and calmer. You can enjoy your coffee and contemplate your code. And the users will be more satisfied. They will be also happier. And it is always better to have happy people around. Just to review briefly what it constitutes to work with feature flags together with experimentation platform, a typical process, right? So when you develop a feature, you may start with a hard-coded feature flag. Then you may connect the experimentation platform to it so you can enable testing even in production, right? Dog fooding and whatever. Then you release your feature, and when it is released and rolled out and you're okay with that, you go and remove the feature flag from your code because you don't want to accumulate this code that you, like instrumentation that you don't need, right? And then after that is done, your binary is updated, you can go to the experimentation platform and finish the feature flag. And let's recap, and I think this is the last thing we're going to do. So with feature flags, and feature flag is just a name, right? So people call it toggles, and there are a good discipline, it's called trunk-based development, all these fancy words, so you can go and look it up. But the idea is simple, right? And it is continuous integration. So how you can integrate continuously. And if you do it, you will integrate early and often. You will have small conflicts instead of having big conflicts later. You will gradually roll out, and this is very important. You can separate deploy and release, and you can release in seconds and roll back in seconds as well. So let's finish it up. So it was a lot, and we went over time a little bit. I'm sorry for that, but there is so much yet to learn. So if I were to say you something, I would tell you just try to find and ignite the interest in you, because if you approach things without being interested in it, it may look mundane and boring, but if you actually put yourself in the context and start asking questions that make your brain work, you actually start digging into it and it will become so interesting. You will love it. So just maintain that interest in you, and you will go through life with like much more engagement. And it's the same discipline that you can also train at work, because it just gives you the opportunity to. So I hope a lot of exciting adventures await. So please go onwards, take your magic sword and magic wand, and just don't be afraid. Follow the map if you have one, and enjoy doing experiments in software. It was Igor from Experimentation Platform. Thank you.